We're going to go back to Brianna Lyman to talk more about that DirecTV situation. And she is a reporter with the Daily Caller and host of the Facts podcast. Welcome back, Brianna. We had a little glitch there. We talked about it before. Democrats are also upset by what's going on with the blatant censorship by DirecTV. What do you think about the response that Newsmax is getting? Because I'm seeing the reports, the resurgence all over the country. I think probably AT&T and DirecTV are pretty shocked by the outrage that they're receiving.
Yeah, I think it's promising. But the reason I would say that some people are so not affected by this is because we have spent the past 4 years censoring conservatives. And you think back to 2020, right? The way to take down Donald Trump was to censor the New York Post story about Hunter Biden. And I can't help but believe we are on the heels of the 2024 election. And Donald Trump is a frequent guest on Newsmax. A lot of the viewers love Donald Trump, and they come to Newsmax because you guys give an unbiased, version of Donald Trump. And I can't help but feel that this is their effort to take a coordinated effort to kind of take down Trump and limit the amount of viewership he gets.
Brianna, what do you make of the legacy media, the mainstream media outlets, Joy Reids of the world, MSNBC, CNN, basically rejoicing in the fact that DirecTV dropped Newsmax? And if they're not rejoicing in it, they're silent in it. The fact that they're journalists, this should frighten them to their very core, because that's the difference between us and them. Us, I always say, is Americans, right? We believe in free speech. We don't like something, we just turn the channel. We don't like it. They, the radical left, they just want to cancel us and shut us down completely.
Yeah, and again, I'm not surprised that people like Joy Reid are not outspoken or upset about this, because they were the same people, again, that were cheering the New York Post being censored in 2020 and all the other conservative outlets that reported on Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. But there's a quote by James Madison. He says, "Public opinion sets bounds to every government." And I think it's important to remember that when the public opinion wants to, for instance, watch Newsmax, and their public opinion is in favor of that, and you stifle that because of political preferences, then you are unfortunately not creating bounds for the government. The government is free to do whatever they want, because the only people reporting on them are the shills on MSNBC, CNN, News Nation, you name it.
So can you also explain to the viewers out there, because, of course, DirecTV is saying, oh, this is all about money. But it's not about money, because they're paying quite a few, almost 24 liberal networks that don't even have anywhere near the audience we have. They're paying them. Vice, I use that as a prominent example, because they're paying them all this money for a half hour's worth of news. So clearly, this is not about money. And DirecTV is a multi-billion-dollar company that can surely pay Newsmax its fair share that it's owed.
Exactly. When you are paying for, again, networks like CNN, MSNBC, who we have seen their ratings crater over the past 2 years, ever since Donald Trump's been out of office, they can't try to hide behind the guise that this is about money, because it's not, especially when we know that they would actually do better having more viewers buying into Newsmax so that they do have access to Newsmax and OAN that they canceled, what was that, months ago, right? And I think when it comes down to it, it's time for places like Fox to also speak up and speak out against Newsmax being canceled on DirecTV. Have those hosts speak out, because there's that old quote, first I didn't speak out because it wasn't about me, but then when they came for me, there was no one left to speak for me. That will eventually happen. The chips will fall. It may not be this year. It may not be next year, but it will happen.
Senator Ted Cruz, he's also been very outspoken about this. Utah Senator Mike Lee also weighed in on the subject, tweeting out, quote, "This is sketchy and I've got questions. Newsmax, the 4th highest rated cable news channel in the nation, a top 20 cable news channel overall and watched by 25 million Americans on cable, was just canceled by DirecTV as a, quote, cost-cutting measure." And Senator Ted Cruz, he's also standing with Newsmax. He wants to fight AT&T and DirecTV censorship. Sources are saying that Congress will take a very deep look at the liberal TPG's role in all of this going on. What do you make of this? Is it? It is promising that we're seeing Ted Cruz and we're seeing Huckabee, we're seeing all these prominent figures coming out and saying this. But I think it's also important that people on the other side of the aisle, anybody who's an American, anybody who believes in free speech, again, they should be outraged by this.
They should. And, Rand Paul was someone who tweeted, I believe it was on Friday. He said, listen, I would have already canceled my DirecTV, but I already did it when they canceled OAN. So he couldn't cancel his subscription. And I think that there's people, for instance, like Ro Khanna, we saw with the Twitter files, he came out in support of free speech. So I do hope he comes out and talks about free speech and censoring Newsmax. But with Republicans in control of the House, I think they will be letting a really big opportunity pass them by if they don't go after the censorship of conservatives throughout big tech.
Where does it go from here, Brianna? What do you think?
Ideally, you'll have enough people cancel their DirecTV. I know the idea right now is, go to your own network or just switch to another provider. But at what point do you say we're not going to keep running? We have to stand our ground. So I think if enough people cancel DirecTV and they get enough pushback and perhaps they get worried that Congress will investigate them, maybe they'll make their decision and they'll change their mind.
And in its place of Newsmax, now DirecTV says they'll be putting on The First, which they have. I mean, God bless them. I say the more news, the better. The more news organizations, the better. But you can't compare what Newsmax has, the product that we deliver, versus The First. Do you think that was just kind of like a, hey, shut up, see, we're not against conservatives. We put up The First. Meanwhile, The First, it does not nowhere near offer the same resources and the same hosts and the same reports that we have.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, The First has some great hosts on there. You have Bill O'Reilly and amongst others. But the bottom line is I guarantee you, if DirecTV looks in 6 months, they're not going to see the same viewership. They might even lose money on this because the people who watch The First, you do it online, you do it on Twitter, but nobody tuned in on TV or demanded that the First be put on TV. They demand that Newsmax is on TV. They want it. So now you're going to see people flocking to Newsmax's website just to get the same news. And the only person who's going to lose out on money here will be DirecTV because Newsmax is one of the top growing news networks in the nation. It's going to be one of those Fox networks, and they're going to miss out.
Right. And AT&T, people need to understand, owes 75% of DirecTV. AT&T, a lot of people have their cell phones, a lot of other businesses with them. I believe I was reading, too, that AT&T also has a lot of government contracts. Maybe they also need to be hit where it hurts, because clearly there is a political agenda here. And while they are a private company, DirecTV, AT&T, they can do what they want. They can carry whoever they want. We're also Americans, and we can choose what services we want. Right, Brianna?
Absolutely. And, again, AT&T, like you said, cell phone providers, everyone can make. I'm luckily Verizon, so I don't have the opportunity to take a stand against AT&T. But there are plenty of conservatives out there that could easily switch to Verizon or another network if it's within their area. And I think that would send a good message. And like you said, you have to hit them where it hurts. And the only thing that people care about these days is money. And that's what has to be affected.
Well, thank you so much, Brianna Lyman. Thank you for joining us. And before we go, don't forget, you'll want to keep it right here on Newsmax. Today, as former President Donald Trump is kicking off his 2024 campaign this afternoon, first in New Hampshire. We will take you there live with special coverage hosted by our very own Tom Basili up next. And then later, we'll have special coverage of Trump's first public events of the year